Hey, sis, something shifted within you from last week, didn't it? Maybe it happened while you were listening to last week's episode. Maybe it happened sometime after, maybe in the quiet moments while you were praying or in the middle of an ordinary day. But something within you moved because it's not just a feeling that you have anymore, that thing that you're carrying. Now there's a thought that's forming that you might not have said out loud. And it sounds something like this. And tell me if I'm wrong. What if this is actually God? And the moment that thought forms, everything changes. Because feeling something is one thing, but believing God might actually be asking something of you, that's a different weight entirely. And if you're honest, that shift, it didn't bring the peace that you expected, did it? It brought something that was heavier. And that's exactly where we're going to go today. And I want you to stay with me because it's important. Hi, welcome back to the Purpose and Calling program. I'm Teresa V. Smithen-Quintana, and here we talk about the process of walking with God, growing in spiritual maturity, and learning how to carry what He has placed within us with wisdom and obedience. Why? Because I like to say sometimes, just sometimes, understanding the process changes the way we walk through it. This is week 2 of our series, The Pull. And if you missed week 1, I want to encourage you to go back and engage with it because we laid a foundation there that this teaching builds on. Last week, we talked about the pull, that stirring you feel that you can't quite explain. And the question underneath it, is this really God? We named 4 different women and where they were standing, and we began the work of separating what's true from what we've added to it ourselves. So today we go one step further because something has shifted. I know it has. You have moved from I feel something to this might actually be God. And that shift, as good as it sounds, brings with it its own type of weight. So let's get into it. I want to name what's actually happening in this moment because it's specific and it matters. Last week, you were asking, is this God? Is He really calling me? This week, she's asking something harder. What if this is really God? And I want to sit in that for a minute because those are not the same question. The first question is about discernment. The second question is about response. And moving from one to the other is not a small shift. It's a significant one. Because here's what happens in the moment a woman of purpose, you, start to believe that what she's feeling might genuinely be God. The weight of it changes. What felt like curiosity starts to feel like responsibility, and what felt like possibility starts to feel like a summons. And instead of clarity bringing relief, it brings something that feels more like pressure. So you start to think about what responding would actually require of you. And you start doing the math on what would have to change in your life, your schedule, your relationships, your finances, your sense of security. And you may start to feel a distance between where you are now and where this seems to be pointing to. And somewhere in the middle of that calculation, right? The thing that you thought was becoming clearer starts to feel complicated again. And so, what do? We pull back. We pull back a little and we tell ourselves that we need more time. You decide that you should pray about it more. You think about it more. You want to be sure before you do anything. And on the surface, that sounds wise, but underneath it, if you're honest with yourself, something else is happening. You're not waiting because you lack clarity. You're waiting because now you're starting to understand what clarity might actually cost you. And that is the real struggle in this moment. Not, can I hear God? But Am I willing to respond to what I'm actually hearing? And those are two very different questions. And learning to tell them apart is one of the most important things a woman of purpose can actually do. So let me go a little deeper, because there's a root here that I really want you to understand, that I want to bring to the surface. And it shows up in women of purpose more often than what we see, okay? Here is what I've noticed. Most women of purpose don't get stuck because they can't hear God. They get stuck because they don't know what to do with what they're starting to hear. And the root of that isn't a faith problem. It isn't a character problem. It's actually something that looks like wisdom on the surface, but functions like a stall underneath, like you're stalling. And so it sounds something like this. I want to make sure before I move. And again, that sounds right. That sounds careful and responsible. But here's what I want to gently challenge within you. Sometimes I want to be sure is genuine discernment. And sometimes I want to be sure is a way of staying in a conversation with God without ever having to respond to what he's already said. Because once you shift from maybe this is God to this might actually be God, something enters the picture that wasn't there before. And that thing is called responsibility. And with responsibility comes risk. The risk of being wrong, the risk of what people will think, the risk of what you'll have to give up, the risk of stepping into something that doesn't have a guaranteed outcome. And all of that risk is real. It is legitimate. It deserves to be taken seriously. And here's the root I want to name that you may not be aware of. You are not wrestling with whether it's God. You are wrestling with what it means if it is. And that is a different problem. And it requires a different kind of honest conversation with yourself, not just with God, but with yourself. Because the question underneath that stalling is not theological, it's personal. It sounds like, am I willing to let this be real? Am I willing to let it ask something of me? Am I willing to move when I don't have the full picture? And those questions deserve an honest answer. Not some sort of spiritual performance, not more waiting dressed up as patience, but an honest answer. Now, I want to do what we did last week. I want to separate what is actually true from the meaning that we've attached to it. Because once again, the enemy takes real feelings and real experiences and he attaches an interpretation to them that feels accurate, but it isn't. And then we start living by that interpretation instead of the truth. So here's one. This feels weighty, heavy, like it's asking something significant of me. That's the truth, right? But here's what the enemy might be whispering. If it were really God, it would feel more peaceful. The weight must mean that something is off. No. Here's what's also true. Weight is not always a warning sign. Sometimes that weight is the appropriate response to something that matters. And when God asked Moses to go back to Egypt, Moses didn't feel peaceful about it. He argued with God like 5 times, I believe. When God called Jeremiah, Jeremiah said that he was too young and he couldn't speak. And when Esther was positioned to go before the king, listen, she went and fasted for 3 days. So the weight that the weight that they felt wasn't a sign that they were off track. It was the sign that they understood what was at stake. And the weight that you feel may not be resistance. It might be some sort of reverence. So here's another fact for you. You don't have complete clarity yet, and there are still some unknowns. Hear what the enemy might be whispering. I need complete clarity before I can move. The fact that I am unsure means that I'm not ready. False. Listen, God has never operated on the principle of complete clarity before movement. You know that. He told Abraham to leave, and he didn't tell him where he was going. So the same thing that applied then applies now. He called the disciples with 2 words. All he said was, follow me. No job description, no contract, no 5-year plan. And the posture that he consistently invites is not certainty, it's trust. And trust, by definition, moves before it has all the answers. Here's another one. You feel both drawn to this and afraid of it at the same time. Here's what the enemy could be whispering. If this were really God, I wouldn't feel afraid. The fear means it's not him. False. See, fear and calling have coexisted in lives of God's people since the beginning of Scripture, honey. Fear not is one of the most repeated phrases in the entire Bible. Not because fear is sin, but because fear is normal. God doesn't tell us not to feel it. He tells us not to let it make our decisions. Those are completely different instructions. The fear that you feel is not evidence that this isn't God. It may be evidence that you understand the size of what he's asking of you. So, 2 scriptures today that I want you to hold them together because they speak to 2 different dimensions of what we've been talking about. The first is Isaiah 30:21. Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. I want you to understand something. Notice it here. In this verse, that is easy to miss, that the voice comes from behind, not from ahead, laying out a full path, not from above, dropping a detailed blueprint, but from behind, speaking into the step that you're already taking, or the step that's right at the edge of you taking. And this is how God often leads, not with a map, but with a word, not with a plan, but with a direction. This is the way. Not here is the whole journey, just this is the way. Walk in it. Which means the clarity you've been waiting for, the full picture, the complete confirmation, that guaranteed outcome may not come before the step. It may come through it. Now, the second scripture, James 4:17, it says, if anyone then knows the good that they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. And I want to handle this verse very carefully because taken out of context, it can feel like a hammer. And that's not how I'm trying to use it. I'm not here to shame anyone into moving before they are ready. But here's what James is speaking to that is directly relevant to where we are. There is a specific kind of delay that isn't really waiting. It's knowing and not doing. It's having enough light and choosing not to walk in it. It's the moment when the question shifts from do I know to am I willing? And only you, my sister, can answer that honestly. Not your pastor, not your mentor, not me. And here's what I want to leave with you from these 2 verses together. God speaks. He gives direction. And direction, by its very nature, requires a response. Not a perfect response, not a fully worked out response, but a response. So here's the exchange I want to invite you into. I want you to release this question. Think about it. Oh, I should say rephrase this question. Am I 100% sure that this is God? Because that question, as sincere as it sounds, will keep you circling indefinitely. Full certainty is not the standard that God set for movement. It never has been. So instead, I want you to ask yourself this question. Do I have enough clarity to take one faithful next step? And that is a different question. It's smaller, it's more honest, and it's actually more answerable. Because when you ask, am I 100% sure? The answer will always find a reason to be no. There will always be one more thing you could pray about, one more confirmation you could wait for, one more unknown that you could try to resolve before you move. But when you ask, do I have enough clarity for one faithful step? That question, it cuts through the noise. It forces you to be honest about what you actually know versus what you're using as a reason to delay. And here's some truth that I want you to carry with you. I want you to say this. I am a woman of purpose, and I don't need the full picture to move faithfully. I need enough light for the next step, and God has already provided that. That's not recklessness, my sister. That's faith. And they are not the same thing. So here's what I want you to do this week. I want you to write it out. Not just think through it, but write it out. Get that little journal that I tell you about all the time. Take the thing that you're now starting to believe might be God and bring it through two honest questions. The first one, what do I already know? Not what you're hoping to eventually figure out, not what you're waiting on. What do you already know right now, today, about the direction? What has God already confirmed, even partially? What thread already runs through your life that connects this? Write it down. Be specific. Don't dismiss the small things. All right, question 2. What is the smallest step of obedience that I can take, one that requires trust but not perfection? Not the full plan, not the launch, not the conversation that you're most afraid of, but the smallest, faithfulest step. The one that moves you from thinking about this to actually doing something about it. And then, this is important, share what you've been sensing with one trusted, godly person this week. Just one person. Not social media, not a general prayer request, just one person. Someone who knows God, who knows you, and will speak truth to you without just telling you what you want to hear. Bring it to them and ask them to pray with you and over it with you. Because one of the ways that God confirms direction is through the witness of a trusted voice. And keeping this only in your head is one of the ways clarity gets delayed longer and longer. Basically, longer than it needs to be. So before I let you go, I want to speak something to you. The fact that this feels weighty doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means that something matters to you. And a woman of purpose who takes her calling seriously should feel the weight of it. The weight is not a warning. It's a signal that you're paying attention to God. You are not careless with your life. You are not casual with your calling. It's important to you. And so the very fact that you're asking these questions, you're seeking answers, that you're here, that you're doing this work and trying to get it right, that says something real about who you are as a woman of purpose. See, discernment deepens movement, not just in meditation. And you can think about this indefinitely and never get further than you are right now. Or, my sister, you can take one honest, faithful, imperfect step and discover that the God who called you is also the God who meets you in the going. He has not left you to figure this out alone. He is the voice behind you saying, this is the way. And that voice is steady, not because the path is easy, but because He is faithful. Listen, you don't have to have it all figured out, but you do have to decide whether you're willing to respond to what God is already making clear. And that's the question only you can answer. And I believe you already know more than you're giving yourself credit for. So before you go, I want to hear from you. Where are you in this right now? Are you at that maybe stage? Or has something shifted and now you're at the this might actually be God stage? I want you to drop it in the comments. I do read every single one of them. And your honesty does really help other women of purpose know they're not alone in this process walk. So if this series is speaking to you, make sure you're subscribed and that you hit the bell notification and that it's on. And don't forget to tune in to next week, because next week we're going to talk about what a calling actually feels like from the inside. And I promise you, a lot of you, it's not what you're expecting. It's not that. You're going to want to be there for that conversation, okay? So once again, hit subscribe, drop your comments, and I'll see you next week. Until then, keep walking in your purpose, trust God, and trust the process. Be blessed.